Hey everyone, we're going to take a look at a story today called Remedy. It's been a while since I have looked at this story. It's always a little bit scary because I don't know if it's going to demonstrate how bad I used to write and maybe how bad I still write. This story will appear with 31 stories for Halloween on Jay Wilburn's Patreon. If you support me on Patreon for as little as $1 a month, you will get 31 stories in the month of October, beginning October 1st and running through the 31st. This will be one of those stories, so you can actually have me read it to you for free as I'm giving it a final edit. Um, Also, coming up in the month of November, I'm going to be doing NaNoWriMo Live. That is National Novel Writing Month. And authors all around the world torture themselves with this challenge to write 50,000 words in the month of November, possibly writing an entire novel. The novel I'm writing, I'm not sure if 50,000 words will be enough, but at least the first 50,000 words I will stream live on Twitch and then edit those videos for YouTube, share them on Patreon, and so forth. So that's what I got going on then. Let's take a look at Remedy. All right. Remedy by Jay Wilburn. Billy brought the gun back to the left so that he stared down the double barrels at his father's right shoulder near the very edge of his plaid sleeve. His father, who everyone in Darremont called Bill Sr. or Big Bill, brought the call back to his lips and produced a rhythmic gobble on the of the tom. Billy watched his father's Adam's apple from the side bob in time with the sound. He expected his father to glance back and scold him for holding the gun toward his back, or even to swat at him for standing out of position. Instead, the man looked forward again. Billy timed his steps to match his father's footfalls. He turned the gun past the red and black plaid of Big Bill's shoulder to the puffy blue nylon of his sleeveless vest. Billy lowered the weapon over the man's spine and raised the barrels to aim at the back of his father's skull. Bill Sr. brought the call back to his lips. He turned his head, and his eyes flicked back in the direction of his son. Shot pellets tore through Big Bill's neck and cheek. The skin around his jaw folded under and away from the bone as if sliced away by a knife. The call flew loose from the man's bloody fingers as his hand shook in the air. His own scattergun rolled out of the crook of his arm and fell to the underbrush by his feet. Big Bill heaved for air, and blood from the artery. All right, let me put a comma there, because he didn't heave for air and blood. He heaved for air, and blood from the artery spewed out into the air through his thinning hair into his eyes. The man reached up with his good hand to wipe the blood away, even as it continued to spray, and his tongue lolled. Okay, let me make that a separate sentence. His tongue lolled out through the opening under his jaw. Billy whispered, "Dad?" Big Bill collapsed as if his joints came unhinged by the word. His hands crossed at the wrists in his lap, and he toppled forward onto the blood-splattered ground. Billy ran up and stood above his father, straddling one of his legs. The man convulsed against the ground, making the same strained howling noise over and over in short, sick bursts. Billy tilted down the gun his father had bought him the previous Christmas and rested against the blue material of the vest on his back. He hammered back the live barrel, but hesitated over the trigger, listening to the unsettling howl. Billy remembered the doctor telling him the heart was closer to the center of the body than most people thought. He slid the muzzle over center and fired the second burst of shot shell through his back and out his chest into the ground. The howling stopped, and Billy let go of his gun, allowing it to crack against the ground, the way he was always told not to do. Billy turned and ran back toward Darremont, like he was told to do in emergencies. It started with the dog. Billy Heckle saw the bumper of the Chrysler drill into the side of the Labrador's skull. The other boys were bent over the handles of Alvin's scooter trying to lock the scavenged trike handles on the soapbox and the overturned soapbox to the wheel board. As they So they missed it. But Bobby had been staring right into the dog's brown eyes when Chrome met Fur, and the life rushed out of the animal in an instant. The woman jumped out of the car and screamed with her hands over her mouth. The other boys ran to the curb beside Billy and cursed. She looked at the boys with her blue eyes wet. Let's say with her wet blue eyes. A little less awkward. Still not the best sentence, but we'll keep going. He kept her mouth She kept her mouth covered so her elbows pushed her boobs together in her fuzzy pink sweater. Her houndstooth skirt hugged her hips and the curves of her bottom in a way that seemed way too obvious to be out in the street in front of boys. This is how Billy pictured women dressing in big cities in his father's stories about coming home from World War II. He imagined loose women in tight skirts in speakeasies 30 years earlier, but not on the neighborhood streets of Darremont. Even in his fear, Billy stared at her body and felt himself stir under the buttons of trousers. The buttons of trousers. Well, it's got to be his trousers, right? Not just any trousers. His trousers, but he couldn't stop remembering the casual light in the dog's eyes snap off to glossy death. The other boys marveled. Oh, she clobbered that mud butt for good. Call out Mr. Hoover's G-men. We have a murderer, boys. Look at the blood on the bumper. Her husband is going to clobber her, I tell you. Are her clothes painted on? I think I want to be a painter when I grow up. That doesn't need to be a question. Alright, so we're kind of placing this story in a mid-20th century time period, I think. The other boys laughed, but Billy looked from the woman to the dog in silence. He planted one foot on the running board of his scooter and pushed off the sidewalk with the other. His wheels leapt from the curb and landed on the street, leaving a long white scrape across the pavement as he went. Where you going, Heckle? I think she's spoken for. Keep your hands to yourself, young man. The other boys laughed again, but Billy took a sharp turn by the Chrysler and skid to a halt between the pricey metal and the dead animal. The rusty iron wheel he used for handles and the fruit crate on his scooter were much more solid than Alvin's and remained together on his hard stop. Big Bill Heckle knew how to build things to last. The woman dropped her hands from her mouth and shook them. No. And shook. Just shook. Dropped her hands from her mouth and shook with her fingers splayed apart in front of her fuzzy boobs like she was trying to shine them up. I didn't see him. He ran out in front of me before I could stop. Is he your dog? I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Billy wrapped his arms around the Labrador's neck and hoisted his limp body up over the wheel and crate. The weight threatened to tip the scooter forward. What the hell do you think you're doing, Billy? That dog ain't got no collar. He's a junkyard mutt. You picking up dinner for your family, Heckle? Billy pushed off and leaned back to keep his balance with the dog's body flopped over the front of his scooter. Shut up, you idiots. He pumped his foot hard to ramp up on the next curb. Neighbors turned and looked over picket fences as Billy raced up one sidewalk and down another street. One man turned with his hose spraying water in an arc above his lawn. He followed Billy Heckle with his eyes, staring at the dead dog until he sprayed his own wife reading in a lawn chair. She screamed and he lost sight of Billy heading into the business district of Darremont. I'm not sure where I got that name from. Darremont up Main Street. Billy turned up the alley between the thrift shop and the taxidermy meat processing place. He turned again on 2nd Avenue and hopped the curb. The Ford pickup screeched as the farmer laid down on the brakes. He screamed to a stop just shy of laying out Billy with his own bumper and followed up by screaming out his open window. Billy bounded up the next curb and skid to a halt in front of Russen's. Billy stepped off and pulled at the door to find it was locked. The scooter tipped over with a crash and spilled the carcass onto its back on the sidewalk as if the dog wanted its belly rubbed. Billy pounded his fist against the door. Dr. Russen, please. The lock cracked and the door jerked inward away from Billy's fist with the ring of a bell. Russen wiped his mouth with a napkin and looked around the scene on the sidewalk. What's going on, little Bill? He was hit. Can you help me? Dr. Roosin looked from the dog's belly to the boy. Is it your dog, son? No, sir. Why are you bringing him here then? He was hit by a car. We need to try to save him. I'm a human doctor, son, and that animal appears to have died on impact. Billy shook his fists. You have to try, Dr. Roosin. We can't just let him go without trying. It's too late, Billy. Dr. Roosin held Billy by the shoulders with the wadded napkin in one hand. The husbandry is all the way across town. Sabbath starts at sundown. I will be unclean if I handle that animal, and it would be for nothing. He's gone. I read the Bible, Dr. Roosin. Billy pulled away from the doctor's hand. That's only for human. He wouldn't say that is. I have a bad habit of not putting contractions when I'm doing a first draft. The story hasn't actually appeared anywhere, so it hasn't gone through a formal edit. That's only for human bodies, I think, and only if we fail to save him. Amateur rabbi, are we? Roosin shook his head. You need to let him go. It's over. All right. I have a Jewish character in here. Apparently, I don't remember doing that. I hope that I handled this subtly and that I didn't fall into any stereotypes in this story, but I don't know because it was written a while ago. So hopefully I handled this well, but we'll see. But it's something to be aware of in the edit, the fact that I've pulled in another culture, and I need to be sure that I've done that well. All right. It's over. No, Billy cried and showed his teeth. I was looking right into his eyes when he was hit. I saw it happen. We have to try. Please help me try. Roosin licked his lips and nodded. He reached down and lifted the animal in his arms. I will try, but there is no cure for death outside of Scriptures, Billy. If your father allows you, come on back and help me play Miracle Maker. Now, would Miracle Maker be a compound word? I am guessing it is not. We'll just keep it 2 words for now. Billy tilted his head. What do you mean if he lets me? Dr. Roosin, I should have a space there. When you have the quotation marks come up on each other, a quotation within a quotation, it's good to put a space between them. Otherwise, it just looks like 3 apostrophes. Dr. Roosin stepped back through his office and called. He's walking up the sidewalk now. The door closed with a ring from the bell, and Billy turned to see his father stomp up to the edge of the awning for Dr. Roosin's office. He still wore his greasy coveralls from the machine shop. Billy realized his father had left work to find him. What in God's name are you doing, Billy? Half the town is telling me you are flying through traffic with a dead body. Billy looked back and saw the Ford was gone. That news traveled fast, even for Darremont. Don't be sassy, Billy. What have you done? A dog got hit, Dad. He looked down at the sidewalk between his feet. I thought I could save it. Did you hit it, boy? Billy looked up with eyes wide. No. Then why did you pick it up? Dogs run in front of cars and they die. It is. Let's make that it's. It's better to put them down than to let them suffer, boy. And why are you bothering the Jewish doctor? We can't afford him. It would be cheaper if he stopped on Main and had him stuffed to bring him home as a trophy. Don't say that, Billy shouted. I had to try. Big Bill scratched at his face, leaving a streak of oil on his cheek along his jawline. You have to listen and do what you were told, nothing else. I'm going to try, Billy yelled. I don't know why I'm yelling. Let me just take out that tag. And we'll have him say, I'm going to try. Don't say that. I'm going to take out the tag here, too. Don't say that. I had to try. All right, there we are. Now, this is called redundancy when says he has to try twice, but in dialogue, sometimes that works fine. Big Bill slapped his open palm across Billy's temple. The boy stumbled into the glass of Dr. Roosin's door with a rattle. Billy held his cheek and stared down at the sidewalk. Watch your tone, boy. I don't give suggestions. I'm going to try. Billy's voice hitched as he spoke through tears. Let me just make that a period, because I don't think that's technically a dialogue tag. The other guys were just standing there making jokes while he died. They weren't looking when it happened. Nothing should have to die while people stand around doing nothing, or worse, while it happens. Big Bill turned his back and rubbed his face with oily hands. I ain't got no money for this. I can do some engine work for him on the weekends, but this was your choice, so it won't be me falling on him. so it won't all be falling on me. You can come back here on your playtime and work off whatever debt your rash decision brings down on you. Doctors ain't cheap, and neither are impulse decisions. Get in there and make this right, boy. You hear me?" Billy took a deep breath and swallowed. "Yes, sir." Big Bill walked back down the sidewalk without turning around. Billy opened the door with a ring. All right, scene break. Billy cried as he ran back through the woods. I don't need to use back all the time. This is one of my quirks. It's always good to find your quirks when you're editing. I have a bad habit of using words too many times, like just and back, and I use then when I don't have to. Billy cried as he ran through the woods. His hands tingled out in front of him, like he could. His hands tingled out in front of him, like he could feel the recoil. I don't think it has to be out in front of him. I could say as he held him in front of him. His hands tingled like he could feel the recoil from the gun he used to shoot his father twice. He stopped and clutched the trunk of a tree, feeling his stomach tighten. He leaned over and opened his mouth as his eyes bulged. His body tried twice to heave up his breakfast and failed. Billy took 3 deep breaths and resumed running. He still did not understand why he aimed at his father's head and pulled the trigger. After he pulled the trigger the first time, he felt the second shot was to relieve the suffering. He wasn't quite sure if it had been for his father's suffering or his own. Once both barrels were spent, he had started running out of reflex. He wasn't certain why he was going, but Billy knew exactly where he was going. Okay, I've used Billy a lot of times. I can drop back to he here. He emerged from the trees overlooking Sage Riverfront Community College. He turned north and continued to run. Okay, so we're dealing with 2 different time periods here. One is in the past, dealing with this dog and the doctor, and the other is Billy shooting his father and then running somewhere afterwards. The second time was to cover up a mistake. Scene break. The second time was to cover up a mistake by Ruson's wife's nephew, and Billy helped because the debt he started with the dog fell on him. Billy Heckle stroked the glossy top of Magic's head as the dog laid in his lap in the passenger seat of Jacob Ruson's Cadillac. They rolled along the river road south toward the community college. Magic's brown eyes glanced up at Billy and then darted around the interior of the car. Did I say it was a car or a truck? Yeah, it's a Cadillac. Okay. Billy figured his dad would tan him if he knew he brought the dog in the doctor's expensive car, but Rusin didn't mind. He picked up Billy for this chore, and he had resurrected the dog himself with Billy's help. "Can you keep a secret, little Bill?" Jacob Rusin asked without looking away from the road. Billy looked down at the dog and swallowed. "I've kept a few, Dr. Rusin." Rusin glanced over to the passenger side. "Has the dog shown any more aggression since I released him the second time?" "No, sir." Billy patted the Labrador's side. "No biting and none of the other stuff. He just behaves like a normal dog, a lazy dog." "Any more sores or graying of his flesh like before? Any more issues with the smell?" Billy blinked and rubbed his fingers together. "Some. I've used the ointment on the wounds and given baths to cover the smell." Sounds like I'm writing a copy of Pet Sematary here. It's always an issue of me sometimes trying to rewrite other people's stories. Rusin turned onto the campus and drove around the service road behind the dorms. Billy looked up at the buildings, wondering what kids learned when parents could afford to send them there. Bill Sr. wasn't much impressed, but Billy figured they must be paying all that money for something. Rusin pulled in behind one of the buildings and opened his door. "Leave the dog in the car. I'll crack the window." Before they could step out, the back door burst open and a young man ran out sobbing. Rusin ran to the boy, carrying a satchel. Ran to the boy as he carried a satchel bigger than his normal doctor's bag. Billy slid out from under Magic's snout. The dog raised his head to peer over the dash, but then rested his head back on the seat without attempting to follow Billy. Billy expected Rusin to hold or comfort the boy, but he slapped him hard across the face, silencing the boy's blubbering and a shocked stare. Billy imagined they must be family. Dr. Rusin said, "Take us up to where she is, and then you go back to your room. You say nothing to anyone until I tell you. If you have to take a vacation to keep your trap shut, you do it. But if you make this worse before I can fix it, I will hide your body. Are we understood?" Billy did not hear the boy's whispered answer, but he took them up. But the guy. Need to separate who's who here. We can't use a bunch of he's. But the guy took them up into the dormitory, and then he vanished, leaving the doctor and Billy alone in the girl's room. Rusin closed the door and locked it. Billy covered his mouth with both hands. Dr. Rusin said, "Don't throw up, Billy. Choke it down and help me like you did with the dog." Billy moaned and said through his hands, "What happened?" The girl lay across the mattress the wrong way, with her head hanging over the end of the bed. Her throat bulged like pictures of snakes in the Amazon trying to swallow an animal too big for its body. Deep purple and black bruises circled the flesh. Her clothes twisted around her worse than her neck. One pink hair ribbon sat discarded on the mattress beside her. 2 buttons were missing on her blouse. She wore lacy socks that reminded Billy of a girl too young to be in college. Her skirt hiked up so that he could see the day of the week stenciled with Wednesday on the pink panties. He was pretty sure she wore the wrong day, so Billy thought maybe she did not expect anyone to see them, certainly not like this. It was an accident, Billy, like a dog running out in front of a car. The dog did not know she was in danger, and the car did not race down the street expecting to turn the light off inside her head. We are here now, and we are going to try to fix it. It's the right thing to do now that we know how. Billy knew what they did, but he still wasn't sure how. Dr. Rusin jerked down the material of her skirt to cover her panties. Let's say underwear. Only guys say panties. So it's probably okay for it to be said when we're kind of sympathetic towards Billy in this story, but then probably don't need to say it more than once. Billy swallowed. Nothing deserves to die while others sit by doing nothing or worse. Better than the Hippocratic Oath, Rusin said. Hold her head while I start repairing her neck. Billy stared into her empty eyes as the doctor pulled the scalpel in 2 slits. Okay, pulled the scalpel, creating 2 slits along the sides of her neck. He gave her the first of the injections in her pale arm and continued the work. Her mouth twitched and Billy swallowed. "Dr. Rusin, do you remember how Magic woke up the first time?" Rusin rolled up a bandana and fed it through her gray lips and perfect teeth. He tied it off behind her neck, then looked almost behind her neck that looked almost normal, except for the bruises and the incisions. "I remember, Billy. We're going to need to get her to the car before she wakes all the way up. I'll keep her in the back of my office until she gets past the worst of it." He took 2 belts and pulled them taut over her wrists and lacy socks. Billy cleared his throat. "Remember, he got better and I took him home before the 2nd episode." "I remember," Rusin said. "I plan to keep her until she is completely recovered. We are responsible for her now." He pulled a burlap sack over her head, stuffing her curls inside. She began to thrash from side to side in her bonds. Rusin grunted as he hoisted her up over his shoulder. She screamed and growled through the gag and the bag, let's say that. The doctor took a deep breath. "Billy, carry my bag for me and check the hallway to see that it is clear." The tires on Rusin's Cadillac spun, and Billy heard muds kick up on the panels. They lumbered up on the next dirt road. "Is this it, Billy?" the doctor asked. Billy looked up the trail and shrugged. "I think so. I didn't come back by the roads." Dr. Rusin turned up the trail. "Did you not plan this in advance?" Billy looked down at the floorboard of the car. "No, sir." What is your plan now, Billy? The doctor asked. I'm out of room in the back of my office. It was an accident, Billy whispered. Not all accidents are accidents, little Bill. Billy licked his teeth. Can you keep a secret, Dr. Rusin? The doctor sighed. We have quite a few, don't we? I kept the secret about the dog and all the bodies so far. So far? Billy looked up at the doctor. Rusin nodded. I kept your secret about your father killing the dog again. Was that what this hunting accident was about? Billy blinked a couple times. Is magic recovering again? Rusin sighed. It is taken longer. Let's make that It's taking longer to get past the aggression this time. Billy pointed off into the trees. There's my dad's Buick. We're close. How far into the woods did you guys go before you shot him? Billy stared off in the trees. Not far. Big Bill shook Billy awake in the dark. Get up, boy, you got a job. Is it time for school? Billy rubbed his eyes. His father pulled him to his feet with his eyes still closed. School ain't real work, boy. The Jewish doctor is here for you. Get dressed and moving. Billy pulled on his school clothes his mother had laid out. He ran down the stairs and out the door. Magic lifted his eyes after Billy closed the door, but lowered them back to the floor. Billy stepped into the open door of the car and pulled it close, snuffing out the overhead light. Rusin pulled away from the curb without looking away from the windshield. What time is it? Billy asked. 10 at night. I know it is 10 at night. I know it's school night. I know it's a school night, but this really can't wait. Billy swallowed. Is it another girl? The doctor shook his head as he made the next turn and rolled over the railroad tracks. Let's say we crossed the railroad tracks. Makes it sound like their car flipped over. Crossed the railroad tracks. No, it's over in the Negro neighborhoods. All right. Hopefully I handled this with care. I know it's the 1950s, but we better keep it together here. Billy looked around through the windows. Don't they have their own doctors? Rusin said the lines are blurred a little now. No one does what we do. Billy cleared his throat. How do they know what we do? Rusin sighed. Our secrets are still safe, little Bill. This is a favor from a mutual friend. This is a big favor. Rusin laughed. He pulled up to a house with cars filling the driveway. Several men stood on the porch. Rusin walked out to the edge of the steps with Billy at his hip. Billy looked at their dark skin and the light. Dark skin cast in the light from inside and thought they looked sweaty. He had never been in that part of... He'd never been in, let's say, this. He'd never been in this part of town before. So here I go with another then. Gotta watch it. Jay Wilburn is terrible about using then and back. He wondered if his father knew that this... Okay. I'm trying to keep it past tense back then. I didn't know that you could use now and this and that kind of thing in a past tense story. It does read better, though. He wondered if his father knew this was where he was going in the middle of the night. Are you the doctor? One of them called. Rusin nodded. I am. Is he inside? You're a little too late. Rusin said I specialize in late, but I'll need to take him back to my office, and I'll need you to trust me. One of the men said, he's got family here, and they are grieving. Rusin said, I can fix it, but it will take a while. Mr. Marvin sent me to make it right. What do you need to do? Rusin said, carry him out in a sheet. Lay him in the back seat, and I'll do the rest back at my office. Things are bad, Doctor. He's going to mess up your seats. I'll worry about that. Just bring him out, and I will try. Let's say I'll try. Okay, Billy heard women screaming as 4 men maneuvered down the steps, each on the corner of the sheet. Billy could see blood soaking through the cloth as they shoved the body into the back seat. The doctor and Billy returned to the car and turned around in the street back toward the office. Billy had to help with the metal rolling cart out onto the sidewalk. Help move Billy had to help move the metal rolling cart out onto the sidewalk on 2nd Avenue as Rusin wrestled with the body. The sheet fell open and Billy saw the slashes gouge deep into the chest through the shirt. Rusin locked on the straps to the wrists and ankles out in the open. I'll say out there in the open. Out there in the open. Billy looked back and forth, expecting someone to show up. As they rolled the body inside, Billy locked the door behind them. They rolled back through the waiting room and the regular exam room. Rusin fumbled with his keys to open the back room. Billy looked down at the man's eyes, but could not see them in the swollen, battered face. Billy was curious, but he didn't ask what happened. They wheeled back to the center of the secret room. Billy stayed away from the walls, but the others did not reach for him like before. He assumed they were between episodes. The girl, not the girl that, when you're dealing with people, you're supposed to say who. It's not a practice followed very strictly, but I think it's the correct way to do it. The girl who had died at the hands of Rusin's wife's nephew sat flipping through a magazine. Her socks had sunk down into her shoes, and the skirt had slid up, showing the day on her underwear again. That day had come and gone twice as Rusin kept watch over her. This time she did not fight against the collar or leash that connected her to the pipe along the wall. Animals and women are not being treated very well in this story, but we'll see where it goes. Billy saw the gray patches on her skin glistening with Rusin's ointment. Billy opened his mouth to avoid breathing through his nose. The other two girls sat and stared at Billy and the doctor without reaching for them or fighting against their leashes. Billy stayed by the man's head as Rusin worked. The man growled and arched his back up off the bloody sheet. Rusin held the end of the table to keep it from flipping. Billy stepped back away from the snapping teeth in the dark face that had lost much of its swelling. Billy, I just keep saying Billy. I gotta say Billy because there's more than one man here right now. Billy gritted his teeth as he heard the stitches across the man's chest stretch and strain. Okay, now I'll say he. He looked back at the girls. They looked up briefly, but went back to staring at other things. The body thrashed and banged against the table, echoing off the walls. Rusin cursed and said, "I'll need to cancel tomorrow's appointments. He'll not be settled by morning." Billy sighed. They're sighing a lot. Billy let out a long breath and held his hands behind his back as he waited. "You'll need more leashes if we're going to keep this up." All right. So now we got another scene break. Rusin looked up from Billy's father in the brush. "You made a mess of things, little Bill. Nothing we haven't handled before." "A little different," the doctor said. "But we can fix him," Billy said. "Like all the others. We have done it. We've done it every time we've tried." Rusin rolled Big Bill to his back, the skin folded open in shreds with leaves stuck to the wounds. A dark hole opened in the front of his chest through the cotton filling of his vest. The second shot through his back and chest was done to finish him off, the doctor said. "Are you asking or telling?" Make that a question mark. Billy stared at his father's empty eyes as he spoke to the doctor. "You could have gotten him help after the first shot. You could have tried a normal hospital." Billy shook his head. "Too late now. Let's get started." "Do you want me to start?" Rusin stared at Billy, who looked away from his father to meet the doctor's eyes. Another problem, of course, is having people looking all the time. Too many looks, too many stares. Try to avoid that as much as I can. I'm not going to tinker with it too much here. If this is about saving your doctor from your impulse of choice, then that's fine. The first time was saving the dog from the car. If you did this to save your dog from your father's hand, or to protect your mother, or to save yourself from your father, then it's not just standing by doing nothing. Having power over life and death means having death as an option. Do you want to leave it an accident? Billy looked over at the guns on the ground. If you figured out the second shot, won't the police? Rusin glanced at the body. You came and got me. I'm the doctor on the scene. I can report it as two barrels fired at once. As an accident. If we save him, Billy swallowed, he'll be changed. Did you do this to try to tame him like the others? Rusin asked. You know there are problems, too. Let's save him. This responsibility will fall on you. Billy moved up by his father's head, and Rusin opened his satchel. The fix took hours. Darkness began to fall over the woods as Rusin continued to build and repair. Billy startled when Rusin began binding. He, startled back from half asleep. Okay. Billy startled back from half asleep when Rusin startled back awake. Well, see here, I'm using back again. I just got through saying that. Startled awake. Billy startled awake from half asleep when Rusin began binding. He fitted the muzzle over the patched jaw of Big Bill. He had Billy help roll his father to apply the leather cuffs over the wrists behind his back. Rusin extended the pole and fit the noose over Big Bill's head before tightening it around his neck. We don't need to say over twice. Around his neck. Rusin said, take the pole, little Bill, before he wakes. Keep a firm grip, but don't pull any tighter. His neck is still healing. Are we going back to the car? Billy grabbed the pole. The doctor lifted his satchel and both the guns. No, I'm going to tow your father's Buick back. My car isn't really built for it, but I should make it. If anyone asks, we're going to say your father was taken to the hospital upstate because of a fall. Keep him hidden inside until he becomes docile. Big Bill lurched up from the ground and growled with his jaws clenched in the muzzle. Billy kept hold of the pole as his father twisted from side to side. Dr. Rusin moved around behind Big Bill beside his son. Billy spoke through gritted teeth. Why are we not going back to your office? The doctor shook his head. I'm out of room, Billy. This is your debt. It falls on you. Big Bill tilted his head back one way and then the other. Billy braced his feet and held on. Billy said, what should I do? Take care of the ones you chose to save, the doctor said, and stay out of the main roads until you get back home. Keep him away from your dog once he comes home, and your mother for a while. Dr. Rusin walked past Billy toward the trail, where the cars waited. Big Bill lunged forward when the doctor came into view. He howled over and over like he had when Billy shot him. Billy grunted and pulled his father sideways as he pushed him forward diagonally through the trees in his bonds. The doctor paused. Do you have him, little Bill? Can you handle it? Billy kept his eyes on his father as he staggered forward. I'll manage. Family is responsibility. It's my debt. The doctor turned away to deal with the guns and cars. Billy moved his father toward home. All right. That is it. I didn't have a strong memory of that story or where exactly it went. It's a little bit different. I think it holds together okay. I was worried because, again, it was set in the 50s and you're dealing with Jewish characters and black characters. But I think it was subtle enough that we showed where certain prejudices lied, but we didn't wallow in them. So I think that's okay. There's a few little writing quirks I have in there that probably could be fixed, but that may be for a second or third pass. I think the story works. It doesn't tell everything, so you have an idea that they figured out how to resurrect these bodies in some manner. It happened with the dog. The dog had to be resurrected more than once because the father killed him at some point, and then little Billy does his father in, hoping to make him docile after all the changes too. And apparently there was more than one girl in town that had to be brought back to life. So I don't know if this is all from um, the doctor's nephew or if these are other incidents, but kind of pulling people back from violence, including one person that apparently was attacked and had to be brought back, that they picked up from that other neighborhood. So um, interesting story, I think. Maybe it'll hold up. Maybe it'll publish somewhere one day. But it's definitely going to be on my Patreon page for people to check out. And of course, if you've seen it now, you've been able to enjoy it for free. And I hope you did like it. We will do this again soon.